Atlas Convention 2021, and this session will be focusing on sustainable development and innovation, and we are focusing, of course, on issues around education, agriculture, labor, and of course other key facets within the context of our national development strategy, which Zimbabwe has embraced as a stepping stone to Agenda 2030, where Zimbabwe should be an upper middle income country by 2030. And aligned to that is the Sustainable Development Goal Agenda, which the Family of Nations envisages to see no one left behind come 2030. And there are 17 key goals, which, of course, are key to attainment of sustainable development goals. And I will definitely kick in now by inviting Professor Nyamangara you've heard the key questions that are before us in this session. And one of the key issues that have been raised is the issue of understanding education in Zimbabwe in the context of sustainable development and innovation.
Thank you very much. I think we, in the education sector, especially higher education, we are undergoing a retooling of the education system to make it more, compliant to what is happening on the ground. We once used to have, an education system which was focusing on three things. That was teaching, outreach, and research. But we have recently also seen that, we need innovation. We need to emphasize on innovation. We need to industrialize. So I think as far as our education is concerned, it's now geared to produce a student who is both academically sound but also capable to hands-on enough and capable of producing goods and services. I think as universities, we have been accused in the past, I hope it doesn't continue for long, of producing students that are just academics. And when it comes to hands-on, maybe they are found wanting, they will improve much later, when they join industry, but that costs money. So we believe that now I think we are on the road to producing students that can produce goods and services, that are able to innovate, and also that are, environmentally, responsible. Because I think we all appreciate that, the environmental management is a big issue worldwide.
Environment issue is a big issue worldwide, but let's just come through to the alignment of the national vision, the national thrust, and of course this whole new concept of education as you put it across. The big question then is, what are some of the key stepping stones if you are to actually then transform that particular narrative, the new narrative, into actual realization moving forward?
I think of course, all universities now are having innovation hubs and innovation directors to emphasize more on innovation. But to do this, innovation has to involve universities and industry. And I think it's still quite some bit of work to be done. We need to work with industries more. This helps both parties. For us, it's an opportunity, to get access to real life issues, the issues that industry wants. And for industry, I think there are a lot of benefits that we have a resource in terms of, the people that are capable of conducting research, which might be too expensive for a company which is mostly geared for, for production. So we believe that through innovation hubs, it's a meeting place for universities and industry. And also we are going further to have industrial parks, whereby we can even, after innovating, if we see that something maybe can be run at industrial level, but maybe we are not yet sure, we can do it together with industry. And then when, things are cleared in industry, the risk is reduced, then it can be fully commercialized. So I think as universities, we are bringing innovations, we are bringing research that can really help industry. And from industry, we also get a reality check, because sometimes we become too academic, and also, funding to do research which is relevant, which has got impact on society.
Very interesting talking points are coming out there. And I'll quickly come to you, Aldofas Chinomwe, from the International Labour Organization. Obviously, you do have that interest when we look at sustainable development, innovation, and, of course, the development of the labor market, particularly in sub-Saharan countries like Zimbabwe. Maybe if you can give us your understanding of education and its link to decent work as envisaged in SDG 8.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think from the perspective of the labor market, I think the key conversation I think that is happening now is we have what we call maybe the 4 mega trends that are kind of driving what is happening, in the world globally, socio-economically. So I think one of those dimensions is, of course, climate change, I think, which forms part of the agenda around sustainable development. We also have a dimension around, the advances in technology. I think we are talking about what we call the 4th industrial revolution. Then you're also talking about, issues around, people, migration, the big numbers of young people in Africa, for example. I think if you look at Zimbabwe, we are talking about almost close to 70 to 75% of the population being below 35 years. But I think the big challenge in terms of sustainable development is that all these young people are not, or most of them are not engaged in what we would call productive economic activities, be it through employment, be it through self-employment. So I think that presents a big challenge. And I think, those that are doing population studies will tell you that, yes, Africa has the potential to reap a demographic dividend, but we can't reap that dividend when we have young people who are not productively engaged. So I think when we look at that scenario, what we then ask ourselves is to say, okay, what is it that can get young people into productive economic activities? And one of those dimensions is, of course, skills. Do they have the skills? And I like what I think Professor Nyamangara is saying, that, you're not training someone so that I think they can get a job tomorrow. You want to train them in such a way that they will be relevant 10, 15 years from now. So we're saying, what sort of skills do we need to be imparting to the young people, or to the young generation? And it's not just the young generation, because technology, I think, has shown us, for example, now, under the COVID-19 pandemic, situations across the globe, we have seen the increased use of technology to interact, to do work. People are working from home. So even older people, like when I look at, I'm not guessing the age of Professor there, but I'm saying even himself, if he went to the level of professorship, but if he needed to, or if he needs to continue to engage in his workplace as an educationist or as an academic, he would need to really gain some new skills that would ensure that I think he's continuing to be productively engaged in his workspace. So one of those areas, for example, I think that the UN has come up together to look at is to really promote, the digital skills, bringing, skills and the digital technology together. And this would definitely be one way that, young people can be able to harness the energies that they have, the imagination and the growth that they have, to be able to contribute productively to the socio-economic outcomes in their countries. And I think from the perspective of the UN, my colleague Tawanda, I think, is also in the call. He can also speak, I think, when you look at, around primary school and secondary school education. But I think it's the same dimension and same thrust, that we need new skills, because in the future we'll have new jobs. And these new jobs require definitely new skills. So this is the kind of thinking that we need to have. And I'm happy that we have already this dialogue as a starting point, maybe for things to happen in the immediate future, for countries in Africa. Thank you.
New job requiring new skills, but are we up to it? Because I'm just trying to link SDG 8, which talks about decent work and economic growth. I know Zimbabwe, for example, was actually prioritizing goal number 8 as part of its socioeconomic transformation thrust. It is closely linked to goal number 9, which looks at industry innovation and infrastructure. Do we have the benchmarks as put across and as envisaged by those particular SDGs? This question I'm going to pose to you, Professor Nyamangara, as well as to my namesake, Tawanda Chinemwe.
Thank you very much. I was saying I think we have some sort of benchmarks, but I think we need to make them more smart so that, we can be able to say this is where we started, this is where we are going. Because sometimes we run the risk of just saying we achieved, but simply because maybe our goals, our benchmarks were not smart enough. But like I am saying, I completely agree with you that in terms of this, of decent work. I'm coming from agriculture university. Of course, in agriculture, we start with the problem even of having, a negative attitude towards agriculture. Farmer mulimi, sometimes it's seen as someone who is rural and so forth. So that's where we have to start with. But I'm happy that recently we have had very young farmers trending, doing very well. And I think our government has been quite supportive and we are making progress. But I think we need benchmarks, both for urban and for rural setups. Benchmarks that are smart so that we can be able to honestly measure our success.
I'll quickly get into the issue of benchmarks, and not just benchmarks, but smart benchmarks. Tawanda Chinemwe, are you with us now? Okay, I will have to pose it to his colleague Adolphus. How do we have smart benchmarks, as it were? Oh, we now have Tawanda Chinemwe. I hope you've been following the discussion so far, and our Professor Chinemwe has been talking about smart benchmarks if we are to actually realize a sustainable development and innovation within the education sector. And my question to you is, how do we then come up with these smart benchmarks?
Mr. Moderator, I think my colleague Chinemwe is dropping off on and off the platform. But I think maybe just to say that I think I would want to call it's no rocket science, so to speak, because I think we have, and I think in computer science people talk about we have many problems, but just as much as a kind of a limited number of solutions. So we have the problems that we see on a daily basis, or even attitudes that we have as countries, as societies. I think Professor just talked about, the attitude of young people maybe towards farming. And I think it is through social media now that probably for the last year or 2-3 years ago that, some young people have ventured into, farming, and they are kind of trending on social media as, young people who are productively engaged. So I think we just have to ask ourselves the questions and be able to apply our minds and apply the relevant skills. So sometimes if you don't have the skills, then you'll not be able to come up with a solution to respond to a problem that you have in your community. So we have huge social gaps in education. For example, right now we're saying a lot of children are not attending schools because of the COVID-19, or we're not attending schools because of COVID-19 restrictions. So how can we ensure that young people or children in rural schools are able to attend education? So you bring together young people, maybe it's an innovation hub at Marondera University of Science and Technology. You say, okay, can we create a platform where young people can be able to interact with a teacher in the safety of their homes noting that maybe, of course, we have another social problem in the rural areas where we don't have electricity, for example, which is needed for people, for example, to be, connected via internet. So how do we solve the problems of electricity in rural areas? We have abundant sunlight, and I remember Zimbabwe is one of those countries that has the best light or lighting conditions to generate electricity throughout the year, 365 days. So I think it's an opportunity again that we are missing. We also have, gaps in terms of, health and sanitation, or be it water harvesting. These are all areas that are crying out for innovation, small technologies that can be able to make a difference, for people in rural communities. And, I've talked about education. You can talk about even health, for example. You don't need to go to a hospital to travel maybe 20 kilometers, which we know, services are not that close to people, but you can interact via WhatsApp to make follow-ups, or to get an initial diagnosis of what the problem is, and then maybe follow-ups can be made later. So we have a plethora of social problems that are crying out for social innovation, or innovation around some of these issues. Some other countries we can learn, yes, there are other countries that have done it. So it's adapting technologies, and also then quickly leapfrogging, to the future, as I discussed earlier, that, whatever we are doing now is not for today, but it's for 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. So our skilling, our education system should be geared in that kind of in a frame to be addressing, challenges of the future and opportunities of the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will quickly cross over to Philip. Obviously, education should have relevance 10, 15, 20 years, but we cannot talk about innovation, sustainable development in the local and global context without looking at the social problems and coming up with ways of overcoming those social problems. I'm quickly reminded of William Kamkwamba of Malawi, the boy who harnessed the wind to deal with a social problem in his area in rural Malawi. And today he's a celebrated inventor and managed to turn around the ill fate of his fellow family members as well as the community. How do we...
Thank you, Tawanda. I would say, in terms of my understanding, if our academic sector or our education, our universities realize that they can stand in the gap as the research and the development conceptualization domains that are focusing on innovation from the research and development perspective, to anchor the SMEs that is largely, we are seeing that we are an SMEs-driven country. How do we anchor research and innovation, like what Prof was saying, that we can come to the industrial parks and then we utilize already existing infrastructure. We test out things until we are sure, without unnecessarily going into risk or losing unnecessary costs. In this case, we are exchanging resources, whereby the academia is getting a hands-on experience, and then the private sector or the industry is getting discounted or value exchange or affordable services whilst they are trying out their products. And at the same time, the industry acts as the application domain to say, after we test out, after we innovate, after we go through the phases of sustainable research and development, we are able to come up with the competent products against the imported products. The moment we're able to exploit the value chain of research and development, prototyping, until we get to the final product that is affordable, or that arrives at the end user in an affordable fashion, then we are winning the equation of bridging industry and academia.
You raise a critical point, the issue of research and development. And I'll just quickly come to Professor Nyamangara, looking, of course, at understanding it from a high and tertiary perspective. How important is research and development and the prototyping? And how far have we gone in that context if we were to push sustainable development in that context?
Research and development is very critical because, like it has been said by other colleagues, we are looking for innovations for the future. So it means research and development has to be a continual process. And because sometimes the risk, I'm talking from agriculture, that there is, when we have reached so many yields, if you talk to seed companies now, they go up to 20 tons per hectare maize. The temptation is to say, no, that is what we want, let's stop research. But I think research and development is very important. We need to continually improve. Talk about Pfumvudza, which has done so well. I have spent so many years working on Pfumvudza, conservation agriculture, as a researcher. We have seen that it works. We thank government that the program has convinced everyone that in this climate, in this weather of climate change, where rainfall is unpredictable and is reduced, Pfumvudza works. But the next thing is we need to increase it to move from food security to income generation. And for you to do that, we then need to mechanize. But you don't mechanize by just saying, okay, from now we have tractors. Because some of our farmers who